Welcome to Talk+Water, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the world of water with those making waves. My name is Todd Bottler, and I'm your host for Talk+Water. I'm also the editor-in-chief of Texas Plus Water and the Texas Water Journal. You can sign up for Texas Plus Water by visiting texaspluswater.org. And you can sign up for the Texas Water Journal at texaswaterjournal.org. Both publications are free. My guest today is Joe Underhill. Joe is an associate professor in the Environmental Studies Program and Political Science Department at Augsburg University in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Joe is also the program director of Augsburg University's River Semester Program. Joe, welcome, and thank you for being part of Talk+Water.
Todd, thanks for having me.
So let's start out with your background in water. How did you first become involved with water or water issues?
Well, I grew up in Western New York at the northern end of the Appalachian Mountains and on an old farm there. And we had a stream and a pond. And as a kid, I just loved exploring and playing around and swimming in the pond, that kind of thing that really creates that connection. And from there, I went on to do a lot of work in environmental studies, environmental education. First on the Hudson River, I worked on a big boat there, a tall ship called the Clearwater, and then did some work actually on the East Coast with some experiential education programs there, including one that took us down the whole East Coast on a tall ship from Maine down to the Bahamas.
Oh, wow.
And that was a highlight of my college education, as you might imagine, and an inspiration for some of the work I've gone on to do since. Fast forward to 1998, I end up in Minneapolis at Augsburg, and kind of not really intending to focus on water issues necessarily or the Mississippi River, but here we are right on the banks of the river. And I started asking around, is there anybody doing work on the river? Is there anybody studying it and, doing courses? And there really wasn't. So I saw a great opportunity there to try and get students connected with this. And there's an amazing, rich community of educators and people, river rats, we affectionately refer to them as. And so I got connected with those folks and that community. And it's kind of been, the rest is history, as they say.
Great. Well, now we have a mutual friend who introduced us, Thorpe Halloran, who's a professor at Minot State University, and he had told me about your River Semester program. And we're going to get into that here in a minute. But first, I want to talk a little bit about one of your areas of expertise, experiential learning, which you've already referred to. Here we are, we're in the pandemic. Last spring, my children went from, in-person classes to classes that were all online, and, started thinking about that quite a bit, about the quality of that compared to being in a class every day. And then started thinking about my experiences, having taken some courses that were online courses where you were actually participating with other students, and some that were, the material was recorded, and then thinking about the classes that I took in person, and then the classes that had labs where we're out in the field together. And it just made me think a lot more about, the benefits of being out in the environment and having a chance to interact with geology or forestry or hydrology of a region that you're studying, if that's your focus. And so I thought, well, let's have a program that looks at some aspect of experiential learning. So why don't you start off and tell us, what that is. Explain to us what that is and talk about its benefits.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I mean, as I alluded to, there's, I found some of the most valuable, impactful, you know, educational experiences I had both as an undergrad and as a grad student happening outside the classroom. Obviously, we know classrooms and now more and more online settings have a great value. They provide very stable, predictable, kind of controlled environment where you can have PowerPoints and you can have lectures and discussions. But I guess I always found that there was something, there's something missing there, even when you're in person, that when you're out in the field, you're out in this rich, varied, kind of unpredictable kind of settings, whether it's on the river or I've done a bunch of study abroad courses. I've taken students to New Zealand. We went to Egypt. We were on the Nile River actually during the revolution there in 2011.
Wow.
And believe me, I at some point I realized, I may be a pretty good teacher, but there's just no way you can substitute the richness, the impact that is students experience when they're in the actual place. They're talking to people who are involved. They're talking to people who are living these realities. People, along the Mississippi River, where we meet with such a wide range of stakeholders, participants, residents. And those stories, those lived experiences really stick. And they also, I think, give us the real picture, right? I mean, when you're in class, you're talking about things often kind of theoretically, second, third hand. But to be there in person, you're getting it firsthand, directly yourself, and you're understanding that things are often a lot more complicated than they might appear in a textbook. I think that's one of the things I've found is that, when we in academia, so often we tend to sort of simplify things to some degree. It's just, of necessity. When you get out in the world, it's a lot messier. It's a lot more complicated. And I think it's worth students understanding that, just how complicated it can be, and challenges, and the good stuff too. That's another big part of it, is that I think sometimes students get discouraged hearing about all the problems in the world.
Right.
When you get out there, you realize there's problems and there's a lot of good stuff happening too. And so I think for all those reasons, I think experiential education is so important. This time of COVID, I know we're really struggling with this. And interestingly, being outside is one of the safest places to be at this point. So we're looking at how to maximize those opportunities, staying out of the classroom, which would become now a kind of a, public health wise, a pretty dangerous place to be. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting now that we're going to be on Zoom and online a lot, but at least we're going to try and do as much as we can outdoors within the public health guidelines that are established. There's challenges to that, but like I say, the experiential side has such huge benefits educationally. So I'm a big fan. No doubt.
Mm-hmm. What you just said makes me think also about this. It's not exactly the same, but it's tangential, I think. Once the pandemic is hopefully a memory, it seems like a lot of businesses are now kind of deciding that, hey, we can get along with people working remotely and doing a lot of work over the internet and these meetings instead of being in the same room with people. I mean, I kind of, to me, that's also somewhat related in terms of, our interaction with each other and the quality that will have maybe in the future, being a little bit less maybe, resulting in some interesting changes in the dynamics of how people work together, because it looks like we probably will be spending less time in the same room with each other in some instances.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, we've been doing a lot more. That is, folks who are doing work on the Mississippi River and some of this river studies work that I'm involved in has, taken a hit this year with everyone, a lot of programs being canceled. But we've moved online, and it's been interesting. I've connected with people I'd never met before, and so there is that upside of having new opportunities to connect. But I think we've all agreed that we don't want to let go of the opportunities that happen when you're in person and with this experiential kind of learning. So. I think, ideally, we want to do the best of both worlds. Get the connectivity, the communicative capabilities we get from this amazing new technology, and then at the same time realize that there's just no substitute for the real thing.
So let's move on to the River Semester program at Augsburg. So tell us about that program. And, I'd be curious to know also when it started and how it got started, all the details you can share with us.
Sure. Well, a lot of times when I mention this program to colleagues at other schools, they're kind of, they're very curious how you could pull this off, because it's not something that it's very common. And it did take some work. I mean, original idea started way back in 2000, actually. And it wasn't until 2015 that we actually really launched it. So it was a long time in coming. But we started early on with some short trips on the river using some boats from a local outfitter, and started 3, 4, 5 days. And, the more time we spent on the river, we'd get 3 or 4 days downstream and realize, why stop here? Why not keep going?
Right.
And so we kept building it out, did a 2-week trip. And at that point, we realized we had enough experience. We had worked out the safety protocols, had a great relationship with an outdoor provider called Wilderness Inquiry, who's been a fantastic partner in this work. And then, so 2015, we launched the first full semester program where we have a group of students, somewhere around 15 to 20 is kind of the max we can take. We travel the length of the Mississippi River from the headwaters down to the Gulf of Mexico, with the main form of transportation being these large Voyager canoes. They're about 24 feet long. They're great boats. We really find them well suited for this particular waterway. You need something that's big enough to be stable, but not so big that it gets into all sorts of other complications and costs. And students on the program take a full set of college courses. They get 16 semester credits in classes in environmental studies, in biology, and political science, and a lot of independent study research. And we travel different segments of the river. We can't paddle the whole way. It takes too long, and we have to fit in all the time for the curriculum, and that
Right.
takes a lot of work. They've got to read, they got to study for exams, they got to work on their papers, etc. So we have to balance that out in there. But we found that we're paddling on the river somewhere around 60 days, give or take, and depends on the weather and other things. And the rest of the time we'll do layover days. We'll stay at field stations. We stay at, like a youth hostel when we're in the cities like St. Louis or Memphis, New Orleans, and do a lot of site visits, take side trips in vans and things like that. So that's the program. We have generally 2 faculty, myself, and then we'll have 1 faculty, like Thorpe Halloran was our first field instructor in stream ecology and fisheries biology. And then the last 2 trips, we've had other faculty and, again, biologists also, but other fields. We offer instruction in history and sociology, urban studies, a range of different topics using guest lectures and that sort of thing.
So how many folks can you get in each one of these 24-foot canoes, and how many canoes usually do you have in your trip?
Yeah. Ideally, we have about 5 people in each boat, along with all the gear. We're all self-contained. We bring all of our, lab equipment, cooking gear, tents, all of that. And so 4 boats, 5 people in each. It's about, we can take 6. It starts to get a little crowded. So 4 minimum, 6 maximum in each boat. And and then we usually like to leave a couple of seats open. So when we have we have guests often who come along and might travel with us for a few days, do guest lecture, participate in some of the research.
I volunteer, by the way.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of interest. And so if anyone listening is interested, feel free to reach out. And we do, we enjoy that. I think the last trip in 2019, I think we had over 75 people total who traveled with us on the trip.
Oh, wow.
So which makes for a complicated but really interesting time, because we get scholars and researchers from really all over the world. We've had international guests who come with us as well.
So the students who are part of the River Semester program, I'm sure they've got to have some prerequisites before they join that program. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of prerequisites, I have a hard time with that word, that they take, and any other kind of preparation that they are required to do prior to the river semester?
Sure. First and foremost, the students have to have the right attitude. And we interview applicants and make sure that they are aware of the challenges. It's a long time to be traveling and living in some pretty challenging kinds of circumstances. So I'd say that's probably the most important part, really, is to determine that they have the kinds of, positive attitude and willingness to take on that challenge. In terms of the academic side of it, we, other than them having, they can't be first year freshman students, but undergrads, and now we've actually started to get some graduate students who are participating as well. That's a new part of this. And there's a application process where it's really about determining, do they have the interest? Do they have a specific focus for some kind of research or some questions that they're wanting to engage in on the river? But we are working hard to try and make this experience as accessible to a wide range of people as we can, and to meet people where they're at, and to help them be able to take advantage of this opportunity. We've been trying to diversify the demographics in the student participants with some success. And a lot of times there are financial obstacles. There are logistical things. It's hard to be gone for 100 days.
Right.
It's hard to hold down a job when you're paddling down the river, that sort of thing. So we've had to work hard at helping students overcome some of those obstacles. And but we've been able to have some pretty good success in terms of increasing diversity in the student participants, and that's been a really satisfying part of the process.
So tell us a little bit about the kind of students who are drawn to the river semester. It sounds like that it's a diverse group, but do you generally see that most of them are students who are, say, studying, freshwater ecology or something like that, hydrology, or are there folks who you would think, you wouldn't, I guess, think that would be something that they would naturally do as part of their time getting their college degree. But they do it anyway. So I'm just really interested in, what kind of students want to do this. And for some of them, is it kind of like the first experience? I mean, major outdoor experience of any length of time?
Yeah, we've had, I'd say the underlying quality, if you will, is a certain adventurous spirit. You have to be willing to kind of get outside your comfort zone and see this as a it's an iconic kind of experience, obviously rooted in history and literature in this country. And so it's it's the kind of thing that a lot of people sort of daydream, oh, wouldn't that be interesting to take a trip down the Mississippi? So for students who like to kind of dream about that kind of travel, that's certainly one thing that brings them to the program. It's definitely for students who like hands-on learning, going back to that experiential piece. I get a lot of students who just find they're not really happy in the classroom, and they like working with their hands. They like doing things physically. We've got a lot of student athletes, actually, because it's a physically demanding semester. Believe me, it's hard work. And some of them like that. The physical challenge of it is important for some. In terms of the majors, we get actually an interesting range. We have some biology students for sure, and I would say the modal major would be environmental studies. My background is actually in political science, so we get some political science students who are interested also in environmental issues. But we've had history majors, we've had art majors, sociology. It's across the board. And again, the beautiful thing about the Mississippi River is that it opens up opportunities for learning on just about any topic you can imagine. There's just so much to explore there. And it's not just about the ecosystems or the natural aspects of it, but the social, the political, the historical, you name it, it's there. So it's been interesting. I'll have a student who comes in who's interested in, food issues or in environmental justice or in art history. And we've been able to work out ways to have them engage with the program, do some independent studies, partner them up with other faculty who are working in their field. And that makes for a really rich learning environment, because you've got people from all these different disciplines who are looking at the river from different perspectives. And the combination makes for some really interesting discussions around the campfire at night, which is often where some of the best discussions happen.
I'll bet. So I went to Swanee as an undergrad. And so when I started thinking about this program, the River Semester program, I thought, I bet there's some English major who's focused on Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, and Mark Twain, who probably has done it, or I may be wrong, but that's just, I immediately thought, I bet that's.
Yeah. I think, interestingly, this coming trip, we'll be doing our next one in the coming fall, 2021, and I'm working with a literature professor, and I've got a couple of students who are English majors and American Lit majors who would like to come along. And obviously, we can't help but reference Twain and Faulkner, and there's such a rich array of authors who've written about the river. And we spend time in Hannibal. We sleep on islands that I'm guessing Samuel Clemens spent a night or two on at some point when he was a kid. And so that's definitely part of the experience. Can't help but have that be kind of that's such a significant part of our collective understanding of the river.
The last book on the Mississippi I read, I'm probably going to get the title wrong, Mississippi Rising, or I'm trying to remember, it was about the Great Flood.
The Flood, sure. Yeah. John Barry's book.
Yeah. And I thought, I wonder if they talk much about flooding and, all that. Such a
Sure.
key
Yeah.
force
Yeah.
today.
I mean, we see as we go down, one of the interesting things is almost every town you go through will have a line on one of the levees or the flood walls that'll have a year on it, so up around here, it's often 1967. Some places it's 1964. Yeah, you get down south and it's 1927 is the big year.
Right.
That was the record flood. But of course, recently we've been having close to that.
Sure.
Almost every year, and we've been out on the river when it's been in full flood stage. And yeah, I get to really appreciate the power of the mighty Mississippi. It is a well-deserved title. So yeah, so that's obviously a huge topic of conversation. The river engineering projects, which are massive, the work of the Army Corps of Engineers, has obviously affected the river more than almost anything else. Obviously, agricultural practices in the watershed as well. But
trying to keep the Mississippi going through New Orleans. Yeah.
Yeah, not through the lower Ninth Ward.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
So the trip must be physically, mentally, and in many other ways challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's 60 days on the water, paddling plus all the other days that are involved in that trip, what kind of a challenge is that for the students? Can you, by the end of the semester, can you just tell that they're totally worn out and in need of some rest? Or, I'm just curious about that. It seems like there's got to be some days where you need to be paddling and the wind's in the wrong direction, and it's going to be a rough day where you're not going to make much progress. And how does the nature of the physical and mental aspects play out?
Yeah. No, it's a challenging trip for all of us, and I think everyone who participated can attest to that. I think first of all, the length. I mean, most of these, study abroad or study away classes like this or field study are often, they might be a couple of weeks. And the fact that we're out on the river traveling for over 3 months, that takes a certain stamina and it can take a toll. And so we have to spend a lot of time and be really conscious and intentional around talking things through, working through tensions in the group. We learn about group dynamics, and we have to really put the time in to make sure that people are okay, that if there are tensions within the group, that they're being worked out in a healthy and constructive way. And obviously that doesn't always work out perfectly. So that's one side of it for sure, just the length of it and traveling as a group in this very intense setting. Physically, it's also for students who haven't spent a lot of time paddling a big canoe or camping out. It is also, we get strong by the end. People get fit. And it's not just the paddling. A lot of, I'd say at least half the work is hauling the gear. We don't have the use of any engines or motors. We do travel in vans periodically to shuttle and do side visits. But otherwise, all of us hauling the gear in and out of the boats, setting up camp, hauling water, all of that. So physically, it is demanding. Again, we have to be very careful to make sure people have time to rest, that they're not getting injured or working too hard. And we've had the other big challenge is when the weather is bad, and when the weather is good, it's fantastic. It's beautiful to be out on the river, sunny, and the scenery is amazing. But in 2018 in particular, as some may recall, that was the wettest year on record for the continental 48, the lower 48 states. And we experienced that firsthand with just torrential rain throughout almost the entire fall. The river was in full flood, and there were times when we were paddling when it was snowing out and the river was in flood. And those kinds of physical challenges when the weather's bad call for. That's when we really need those students to have that positive attitude. And
right.
we've been fortunate. You need one or two people who know how to lift people's spirits. And we have staff with us. We have a couple of field staff who come with, who are seasoned outdoor leaders, and they help with that a lot too.
Good. Well, I'm sure you had some unusual incidents along the way from Minnesota to Louisiana. And I'm just curious if you could share some of those that have kind of stood out to you.
Sure. I'd say I mentioned the weather, and, we've had a couple of times. I'd say the most dramatic was we got hit by some straight line winds. We were just a little south of the Twin Cities here and clocked it somewhere between 80, 90 miles an hour. That
hurricane force
really decimated our campsite and blew a couple of the tents literally out into the river with the gear in them. And so that day we had to, fortunately, no one was injured. We had to get gear replaced, and we spent that night sleeping in a local casino hotel, which was not a part of the plan, but it was an interesting experience for sure. I don't think anybody lost any money that night. We stayed away from the slots. But so we've had some encounters with extreme weather occasionally, which is always exciting. I'd say the most interesting stuff always is the people we meet. There's just, you never know who you're going to run into along the way. So we've met with fishermen, with people who are paddling the whole length of the river, the through paddlers, and we've joined with them. Some of them travel along with us for a few days, even a couple of weeks. We've had people who've just kind of, joined our flotilla and told us their stories, and that's been really fun. We've met with folks in Big Muddy Mike Clark, who runs a canoe outfitting company in St. Louis. John Rusky and Mark River Peoples work with this group called the Quapaw Canoe Company down in Clarksdale, Mississippi. Folks like that who are just amazingly knowledgeable and experienced with the river, and they tell us wonderful stories and tell us about the river based on their lifetime of experience on it. So the people, I would say, is the most interesting thing. One combination of that I'll just share was a story where we were, again, stranded by bad weather in 2018 down in the small town of Trempealeau, Wisconsin. And we had to take shelter because there was no other camping. And there was a local church, a Lutheran church, that took us in. And we actually ended up spending, I think, 3 or 4 nights there at the church. And it just happened to be that we had an international group with us, some folks from Norway, from Jordan, from Palestine and Israel, who were all traveling with us. It happened to be, beyond that, it happened to be Yom Kippur. So we had a observance of the Day of Atonement led by a lay rabbi who was with us in the sanctuary of a Lutheran church in Trempealeau, with this international group of people involved. That was not planned. It was a fascinating, actually deeply moving experience. So those kinds of random things that happen along the way that, again, incredibly memorable, moving for the students in surprising ways. And and there have been others like that.
So I was thinking, I bet there's got to be some story about somebody coming down with appendicitis and, or close encounters with a barge or something like that. I guess you're able to stay out of the way of all river traffic because Mississippi's a busy river, particularly from, Memphis down. Lots of barges, and, I imagine that, they're throwing off big bow waves and things like that you could be swamping, someone in a canoe.
Yeah, I mean, we actually, I don't know if you knew this, but we did have someone have appendicitis on the trip in 2015 in Hannibal, Missouri. And fortunately, we were, we detected she had a problem, got her to the hospital. She had the appendectomy and was able to return to the trip about 2 weeks later, actually.
Oh, wow.
Finished it out. So that was definitely the worst health challenge we had on the trip. And in terms of the barge traffic, it's a huge concern, and we have to be very mindful of that, fortunately. And I mean, we just are very, very mindful of that and make sure to stay well away from all of that traffic. And it gets, even more concerning, obviously, when you get to the big cities. The Port of St. Louis is a very, very challenging place to paddle through, very busy. And then when you get down below Baton Rouge, of course, you've got ocean-going freighters and cruise ships on top of that. And so that's a very high priority, obviously. Fortunately, it's not too hard to avoid them. They move slowly, and we pay very close attention. We also use the VHF radios very actively to stay in communication with them. And, they're confined to the navigational channel, kind of the middle of the river, and we can stay to one side or the other. And in that way, it minimizes the chances that we're going to have any kind of close encounters. But yeah, there have been a few times where, you come around the corner, you come around the bend, and there's a barge in tow that's, probably, weighs hundreds of, I don't know, I don't remember the figures off the top of my head, but hundreds and maybe thousands of tons of freight. And it makes sure it ensures that you're needing to pay attention. You don't want to just sort of space out and listen to tunes or whatever. You really have to be mindful of that, and that's a big part of what we do. And it's an important lesson for the students too. It's sometimes it's important to look around and pay attention to what's around you.
So what have you seen in terms of the biggest impacts of some of the students who've participated in the river semesters? Anything that you I guess notice generally among most of them, and anything more specifically that you've noticed with certain students? I'm just curious. To me, I think, wow, if I did that, that would be a huge impact, to have done something like that. And so I'm sure you witnessed that.
Yeah. It's always, teaching is a sort of mysterious business. You never quite know exactly what impact you're having, but certainly the students have reported that this has opened the world to them. I think it kind of expanded their horizons is really maybe the simplest way to put it. And a lot of the students who've been through the program already have kind of just gone on to live very full, expansive lives. They learn how to navigate the world. If you can get down the Mississippi with 20 people and finish your courses and do all this, you can do a lot of other things as well. So I think that's part of it. The other thing is they really connect to the river. They learn to love this body of water. They go from originally experience thinking it's kind of dirty and polluted, which of course it kind of is. But they also learn that it's got a huge amount of life in it. The watershed and the ecosystems are still going strong despite all the things that we've thrown at it. There's some incredibly beautiful and still pretty wild stretches of the river, which is really surprising, I think, for a lot of people. So I think they really come to feel that connection, and that's obviously for folks interested in environmental issues, that's a huge win. If we can get people to appreciate something and feel that they have a direct connection to it. So we usually find that after the first or second time they've gone swimming in the river, which at first they think, oh no, I'm not going to swim in that. but we don't swim in it everywhere, but there's certain stretches where it's great. It's, it's safe and it's wonderfully refreshing. And you do that a few times and they get that connection. And then I think a lot of them also, it just is it's a growing up experience for many of them. They mature, they get a sense of their own abilities, of what their own calling in the world is. This is a good test for them to say, do I want to be a scientist, or do I want to be a historian? Do I want to become a lawyer? They get to kind of explore those. They meet people who are doing that work. They meet all these different kinds of residents along the way. And from those encounters, I think they often leave with a better sense of their own direction in life. So I'd say that's those are a couple of big takeaways that I found. We had a couple of folks, it doesn't always happen, but we had a couple of students who have since gone back and paddled the whole thing again themselves. So they liked it so much the first time they decided they want to go back and do the whole thing. So do it through paddle. So that's happened a bit.
So have you noticed any changes in the Mississippi over the years that you've been making this trip?
Yeah, I would say that over the last 20 or so years, the most dramatic shift has been in terms of the community's relationship to the river, which historically had been something that people turned their back on the river. They used it as waste disposal. There was a time when the Mississippi River up in the Twin Cities here was basically dead. They did a fish survey, and I think they found one carp. That was it. And now it is alive, and it's not anywhere near what it was, before settlement, but it is much, much cleaner and much, much nicer. And even during COVID, we've noticed a huge number of people down by the river, paddling it, walking, enjoying the water, fishing, and there is more and more residential and recreational development along the river. Almost every city along the way has kind of returned to the river and embraced it and seen it as a resource and an amenity and a real positive. Whereas before it was seen as, something you didn't want to go down by the river, and all the, it was industrial. It was dangerous. It was smelly. It was not a good thing. So that's probably the most noticeable shift, has been the kinds of relationship of these communities, the residential and recreational, more park space, more boating, all kinds of different uses of the river. And the other thing is just that every time we go out on the river, it's different. It's hard to say if there's a trend there, but every time we go out, that's the nature of the river, right? You can never put the foot in the same river twice. And it's true. Every time we go down, it's either the river's at a different level, something's flooded, something's eroded, there's new growth somewhere. It's always changing. And I guess I would take that as a positive sign to say that the natural dynamics are continuing. We try and control the river. We try and channel it and keep it going in one way just to suit our needs. And we do a pretty good job of that. But the river is still doing its thing. It's still working. It's still doing what rivers do, of transporting sediment and supporting life and always changing. And so it's always fun to go out on the river and just see what's it going to be this time, because we never know what it's going to be like. It's always at least a little bit different, and that's part of what makes it fun.
That's great. So, Joe, how can our listeners find out more about the River Semester Program at Augsburg?
Well, the easiest way probably is just to go to our website, which is augsburg.edu/river. You can search for it online as River Semester, and that should come up pretty easy. And we've got information there about past trips, about our next trip that's coming up, which will be fall of 2021. And we've got some social media presence on Facebook and Instagram. That tends to be pretty quiet when we're not on the river, but when we're out on the expedition, we post a lot of stuff there as well. And obviously, if anyone's got questions, if there are students out there who might be interested in joining us, this is something that's open to students from any college or university. And they could just email me, Underhill@augsburg.edu. That contact information is on the website as well.
Great. Joe, thank you for being with us today and talk about the River Semester program at Augsburg. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, Todd, it's been a pleasure. It's been great to talk and great to make this connection with Thorpe and some of the other river community members.
Excellent. This has been Talk+Water. My guest today was Joe Underhill, an associate professor in the Environmental Studies program and Political Science department at Augsburg University in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Joe is also the program director of Augsburg University's River Semester program. My name is Todd Bollard, the host of Talk+Water. Let's talk water again soon.